All right. Good evening, everyone. Right. So thank you for joining us in this evening. I know that it's been a very busy week for most of us. Some of the students just came from class 30 minutes ago, and some of them have also been busy the past weeks, working on a lot of different projects in their sprints. And I'm sure as well that our guests have also been quite busy, preoccupied the previous week and doing a lot of things. But it's nice as we're very grateful to have you join us tonight as we discuss the different projects that Pintig Lab is working on. So, Data Talk is an event held by Eskwelabs to promote awareness on the different projects in data science happening in the country as well as around the world. So, tonight we are lucky to have with us the Pintig Lab team who will be sharing with us what they have been busy working on the past several months. Their goal is to be to whet everyone's appetite here and using data science for a cause, for social good, as they have been doing in their respective projects. So happy with us. We have with us three speakers tonight. So Riza, Reina, and Sheena, we will introduce more later on before their talks. But if you don't mind, Riza, Reina, and Sheena, are you guys here? Hello. Yeah. So welcome. So thank you for joining us tonight. I know it's not the most ideal schedule. It's Father's Day tomorrow, so I hope yeah. Thank you for being able to join us. And probably in the middle of your weekend celebration. We have a lot of eager students here. I know very well that I've been talking to them prior to this, and they were so excited for today's event. Okay, so without further ado, maybe it would be better for you guys to share something about yourself. So Riza, maybe you can start us off.
Sure. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Riza Halili, project manager for Pintig Lab. I'm excited to meet all of you and share what we've been working on so far. Sige. Maybe Reina can go next.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Reina Reyes. I see some familiar names or faces, so it's good to be here. Thanks for inviting us. I'm the Chief Technical Advisor of Pintig Lab, and yeah, looking forward to sharing what we've been working on and getting your questions and inputs as well. Pass it on to Sheena.
Thank you, Reina. Hi, everyone. I'm Sheena Cases. I'm the data analyst of Pintig Lab. I'm also excited to know also more about your work. Maybe you can also share what you do, and we're also excited to share what we're doing at UNDP. Thank you.
All right, cool, cool. Cool. So it's nice to hear what to for you to introduce yourself. So this is just be a very casual conversation between you and the student. So we'll start off with you guys sharing a big picture of of what Pintig is all about, what are the projects you're working on, and then later on we'll be breaking out into rooms for the students to have a more intimate interaction with each of you, or at least I think with Sheena and Reina, and then Riza will be jumping into rooms to answer some questions probably about Pintig overall. So I guess with that, maybe we can start with Riza to share with us a big picture of what Pintig Lab is, and how and all the details of how you started, and yes, and what are you up to right now.
Sure. So I'm going to share screen na. Oops. Okay. Anyway, but again, good evening, everyone. I'm Riza, and I'm here to give you a short introduction of Pintig Lab, what we're about, our vision, and then Sheena and Reina will be talking about our two main projects right now. So the Pintig Lab was actually born out of the COVID-19 crisis. I think everyone in the room already knows the grave impact ng pandemic not just in terms of health, but also the economy. So this really brought about a need for accurate and real-time data to properly respond to this crisis. And it also highlighted something, a problem that has been present for a long time, that data is fragmented between and within institutions, government offices, sometimes even the same office, fragmented yung data. And this really posed as a big problem for the pandemic, because if the right person does not have the right data at the right time, it meant lives, diba? So this really pushed everyone in government, the private sector, civil society to come up with solutions. So it also brought about, if may silver lining, it also brought about a newfound appreciation for data in general and also data governance. And I think it changed the relationship ng public with data as well. So we wanted to respond to this crisis. So the Pintig Lab was born. We are a multi-stakeholder network geared to strengthen data governance capacities and to drive evidence-based decisions related to two main things. So response and recovery for the COVID-19 crisis. And then the second one is the attainment of the SDGs. So really focusing on long-term development, for the sustainable development goals. Ang goal nito is to achieve it by 2030. No? So we are in the decade of action. And that's what's fueling us at the Pintig Lab. So our work is focused on three main areas: capacities for data-driven governance, creating a public data pool, and also coalition building and policy advocacy. So just to share some of the work that we've done in terms of capacities for data-driven governance. We came in the start partnering with the IATF and the Department of Health, and we came in thinking, ano ba ang kailangan? So one of the biggest gaps then was there walang capacity at that time for their staff to handle big volumes of data and big volumes of data coming in on a daily basis. So we supported the department by providing data managers. And then we also supported them by creating digital health platforms. So ito yung mga nakikita na natin ngayon online. So we supported the creation of a command and control platform that maintains, processes, cleans all of the data on COVID-19. And then it creates visualizations that would be reflected in dashboards. So there are specific dashboards that's available to the public, to the Department of Health, to the IATF. And then we also supported modeling and projections on COVID-19. So the FASTER platform and the FASTER model was actually developed by Ateneo, and working with them on maintaining this for the Department of Health. So the FASTER platform uses COVID-19 data, and then it creates projections on healthcare utilization. So this is up to the barangay level, and then it can span like what it would look like for the next week, the next month, etc. And then this has been very useful and critical actually in what informs policies on quarantine. And then we also supported the Department of Health and the IATF in contact tracing through chatbot surveys and also SMS surveys. And this was, of course, brought to the national level, pero na-roll out din siya, and it's also available at the local level as well. And the gains from this are huge, you know. We cleared the backlog of cases from 27,000 cases to 0. Reporting times for cases and deaths was reduced from 24 days to 1 day. Accuracy ng data increased from 70% to 95%. And the Department of Finance actually estimates that the projections from the FASTER model prevented 1.5 million infections. And personally, for me, one of the biggest gains then of something like this is the creation of a response unit. So institutionalizing a response unit at the Department of Health. And usually, institutionalizing something like this takes sometimes years, and this one only took months. So nakita talaga ng government the value of having real-time data and the value of data science in their work. And so kami sa Pintig Lab, we're looking at this model and looking what we've achieved and thinking about ano ba yung next step. And the next step is really looking towards socioeconomic recovery. and then working towards the Sustainable Development Goals, strengthening our relationships with other government partners. And then we're seeing all these digital health platforms and its benefits and ano yung nagagawa ng real-time data. And we're thinking na what would happen if we created something similar, but now for socioeconomic data or social or data on the SDGs. And we want to see what would happen if we replicate something like what we did with COVID, having this not just available at the national level, but even at the local level as well. So ito yung parang general, the vision that Pintig Lab has and what we're trying to work towards. And so now, in order to create the digital SDG platform, our second work stream focuses on creation ng digital pool. So any data pool or data portal platform or anything would require really good data mapping, data standards, data cleaning, data engineering, data stewardship, governance, and everything. And we've seen that this is already possible through our work in health, and we already have this in the data pool. Pero now, if you want to work on socioeconomic recovery, then we need socioeconomic data. Usually, we get this from government, no? From the PSA, and the NDRMC actually has a lot of data as well. So we've analyzed and looked at the data that they have, and we've seen na okay naman siya, but there are gaps, may mga kulang pa rin. And also, if we want to replicate yung pagka-real time ng COVID data, hindi masyadong real time yung existing data that we have right now. So how can we look for a solution for this? So we're looking into using private sector data. We've been talking to different companies, also especially Facebook, we're using data from them, and also Nielsen. And we want to see if we can use this to complement government data for socioeconomic recovery. And to make this also public as COVID data is also public, para all development actors can use the data and inform decision making in different development work that they're doing, not just in government. And so the third stream of work that we're working on is policy advocacy. And it's really cultivating this network of different development actors. So those in national and local government, the private sector, civil society, and getting this community to contribute their data. So to work on data generation, data maintenance, data governance, and then not just making sure that this data pool is available publicly, but also making sure that it's being used. So that's why we also try to make sure that this community also has the active participation of the academe then. So we want this data to be used for data analysis, for research, and policy recommendations that would now feed into informing development planning, budgeting, programming, and also monitoring. So again, it's not just the development planning of government, but also CSOs, because a lot of CSOs are working on different projects, and even the private sector are also working on development projects themselves. So it's informing the general development work that would feed into the achievement of the SDGs in the long run. So as we plan, budget, program, and also do monitoring, the monitoring efforts would actually create data, no? And then this data can also feed into the data pool again, which would help keep this data pool recent and support real-time decision making. So this is the general vision that we have at the Pintig Lab. And what we've been doing in the past few months is we've been doing use cases to see if this is actually possible. So nakita na natin possible siya sa Department of Health for COVID, and we continue to support them. But now we want to study socioeconomic recovery, and we're trying to see use cases to see if this type of model is actually possible. How can we use non-traditional data sets? How can we further support government in terms of appreciating this type of data? Not just in the context of a pandemic, but just in normal everyday decision making. And making the use of real-time data. So we have Reina later who will talk about our work with local government units. And then now we have, and then next after me, we have Sheena who will talk about our use case on using non-traditional data sets. So that's the general vision for Pintig Lab. I'll be joining the other breakout groups if you have further questions on that. But I'm excited for you to hear about what Sheena will be sharing today. Sige, Sheena, ikaw na. Thank you.
Sige, thank you, Riza. So as Riza mentioned, I will be sharing about how we use non-traditional data sets to assess the socioeconomic impact of COVID-19 across Philippine households. So next slide, please. And so this will be our outline. First, I'll share a story with you how the inquiry started, and then I'll share with you the characteristics of the Nielsen market research data, which we mainly used for this research. And then we'll go through the results of the analysis, particularly the non-traditional economic recovery indicators and the impact of COVID-19 and the pace of recovery. And then we'll discuss some potential policy research directions. So why did we think about using non-traditional dataset? This actually started when we had a discussion what to offer the government, how we can monitor the recovery of the country. And we had this idea about what does it tell about the status of the household if they begin to decrease or increase their spending on key products they usually buy. So we first thought about coffee. It started with coffee. What does it tell about your household if you started shifting your consumption of coffee? What if you stop buying instant coffee, for example? And then we try to think about expanding it, and what about noodles, biscuits, until we came up with we were asking around how to monitor the spending on these products until we came to we knew about the FMCG data. So FMCG, or fast moving consumer goods, next slide please. These are like the group of products that are, these are the packaged goods that are highly in demand and can be sold quickly. So these are what we see in groceries, the packaged food, noodles, chips, breads, toiletries, beverages, and like instant coffee, bottled juices or sodas. And this also includes over-the-counter medicines and personal care products. So what does it tell about the household if we begin to increase or decrease the spending on these items? So the idea is, next slide please. There are official economic recovery indicators which we usually use to know the health of the economy. So we have the national income accounts from the Philippine Statistics Authority, which are released quarterly. So we have the GDP, and the GDP can be disaggregated by expenditure like household consumption, government consumption, etc. And we can also get data regarding household consumption, and this can be disaggregated by categories like food and non-alcoholic beverages, utilities, and etc. And GDP can also be disaggregated by sector, or from which sectors the income is coming from. So is it coming from services, manufacturing, etc.? And these categories can be disaggregated further. We also have the labor force survey, which is collected quarterly, January, April, July, and October, and collected by PSA also. And we can learn about the unemployment rate, underemployment rate, and labor force participation. But then the challenge in using these data is that it takes quite a while before they get updated. Like what I said, it's released quarterly. And what if we want to have a sense of the real-time recovery status of the country? So we thought about using non-traditional data sets to supplement the analysis using these official economic recovery indicators. So next slide, please. So there, as mentioned earlier, we thought about analyzing the household spending on FMCGs. So we got data from Nielsen, and the data points are for weekly periods. And these This data can be disaggregated by geographic area, and it can also be disaggregated by socioeconomic groups and source of goods like supermarkets, groceries, and etc. And we also thought about analyzing with this the mobility index from Google. And we have daily data on mobility, and this has data, the national, regional, and also data for major metropolitan areas. So next slide, please. To share more about the Nielsen market research data, this data has 3,600 panelists, 2,400 urban, 1,200 rural, and what they tried to do was to record the transaction level purchase through the diaries. So the households record their purchases, and these are gathered by Nielsen. And the Nielsen data is representative of around 25.5 million households. And you can see also here the disaggregation by the segments. So most are from Mindanao, 23% of respondents are from Mindanao. And 52% of respondents are, or of households are from Group D, or the low-income households. Okay, next slide, please. So these are our main research questions. First, we tried to see the impact of COVID-19 and what is the state of recovery from COVID-19 crisis at the national level. And then we tried to observe the differences in the recovery across different geographic areas in the country. And we tried to identify the relationship between the level of mobility and the pace of economic recovery. We then tried to observe the differences in the pace of recovery across households belonging to different socioeconomic groups. And then we tried to identify if there was an effect of the distribution of cash on the spending patterns of the households. So here, so in this first graph, you can see all the indicators I mentioned earlier. And what we tried to do here was to get the percentage difference of these indicators from their baseline values in 2019. So these are percentage change. So first we look at the red and blue lines. These are the GDP and the total household consumption trends, and you can see that they follow almost the same path. This is quite expected because 73% of GDP is total household consumption. But you can see the gray shaded areas are the strict lockdowns in the country. And you can see during that time, these two had a decline during those periods. And then it gradually increased towards December 2020 and then decreased again during the early months of 2021. And then next, we try to see the green line. This is the food and non-alcoholic beverages, and it's quite understandable that it increased during the strict lockdowns, which indicates probably hoarding of food and beverages during the lockdowns. And then it decreased again before it steeply increased by December 2020, and then decreased again during the early months of 2021. And we can see the black line. This is the FMCG spending. It's somewhat in between those two major trends. And we can see that during the strict lockdowns, it declined, which then gradually increased until a few months before December, and then declined, and then increase again until it's around the same value around the early months of 2021. And then the last two, the yellow line is the mobility data, and we can see that this had the steepest decline, and then it continuously increased until early month of 2021, and then decreased probably because of decreased activity, and then had a steeper decrease by end of March until April. And we can remember that this was the second surge, the surge of COVID-19 again in 2021, and we had stricter lockdowns again. And then last would be the consumer outlook. And we can see that there was a steep decline from 2019 to 2020, early 2020, and then it gradually increased by the end of 2020. But we can see that it's still very low compared to the 2019 value. And then it's also important for us to be mindful of other economic indicators mentioned earlier, like in April 2020, we had the lowest record low employment rate at 82.4%, but then it increased by March 2021 to 92.9%. And again, our economy is really not in a box, isolated box, but it really interacts with different systems, and this can be affected by a lot of factors, but we focused on this. Next slide, please. So after that, we then tried to see what the FMCG data tells us about the geographic areas or their pace of recovery. And we can see in this graph that during the strict lockdowns, almost all areas, so we can see the red is Northern Luzon, blue, Greater Manila area, green is South Luzon, purple is Visayas, and yellow is Mindanao. Almost all had a steep decline during the strict lockdowns on FMCG spending. And we can see the Greater Manila area, most of the time, were above the 2019 average spending. And we can also see here that all lines generally had an increasing trend up until October, and then there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of volatility, like a decline before December, and then a peak again by December, and then by April 2021, we can see that those that are above the 2019 average, or the gray dashed line or the zero, are Visayas and Mindanao. And then below the 2019 average or the pre-pandemic level, we can see that below that are North Luzon and South Luzon. So for Greater Manila area, what could explain this? We were thinking about a lot of factors, but probably what explains the trend in Greater Manila area is that it has high connectivity. So people in Metro Manila has more opportunity to work from home given the high connectivity in Greater Manila area, which enables them to earn and to have money to spend for FMCGs. But when we try to reflect if, for example, Northern Luzon and Southern Luzon, probably a lot of people lost their jobs, or their businesses have been affected. Maybe there was low connectivity in those areas. And then we can see that the purple and yellow lines, Visayas and Mindanao, were above the pre-pandemic levels. So what are other factors that could explain those trends? One thing we tried to relate to this data was the mobility data from Google. So next, the mobility trends from all geographic areas. Okay, so we can see that Mindanao has the highest mobility, and also Visayas also had high mobility. So probably mobility had an effect on FMCG spending. And one factor that we can also consider here is the consumer confidence. So next slide, please. So we tried to correlate FMCG spending with mobility, and we found that it's more moderately correlated with the mobility is moderately correlated with FMCG spending with R squared of 0.43. Next slide, please. And then last, this graph shows that different socioeconomic groups had different recovery trajectories. And what's interesting about this graph is that if we look at the purple line, that is the very low income household or the poorest households in the country, we can see that they had a peak or a spike by May 2020. And we are relating this to the giving of cash aid to the poorest households. But you can see that the low income households had sustained levels that are below the pre-pandemic level. So our insight about this is that maybe they also needed cash assistance, but maybe a low percentage of this group were given that cash assistance. So we need to have some rethinking regarding who to give cash assistance to. But we see the classes A, B, and C are usually above the pre-pandemic levels. So we can see that there's really a disparate effect of COVID-19 to various groups or household groups in the country. Not all are coping well, and some groups are really coping just fine in terms of FMCG spending. Okay. So what we learned from this research was first, strong relationship between mobility restrictions and household spending levels. So we saw the correlation earlier. And then second would be there's a large disparity between the pace of recovery and spending of households from upper and lower socioeconomic classes, as shown just the previous slide. So we need for greater support to vulnerable households through cash assistance and other social protection measures. And then lastly, we might need to consider giving to support further the giving of stimulus packages, because we saw that it had some positive contribution in the recovery of household, as what we saw in the spike in the FMCG spending of the social group E. So we need to consider other also robust stimulus package and spur the economy by taking into account the recent ECQ and MECQ and NCR plus. And we can also make it more comprehensive. So, yeah, thank you. That's the those are the main findings of that research. So now, Reina will share with us what we are doing regarding the anticipatory governance related to COVID-19 response for LGUs.
Thanks, Sheena. Yes, I'll share some analysis and our recommendations and initiatives for anticipatory COVID-19 response of at the local level. Next slide, please. So we'll go over the COVID-19 situation in the Philippines. For context, we this analysis focuses on the second surge in NCR plus region that started in February. But as we know, that is now also that has been we're on the tail end of that wave. We see now surges also in other parts of the country. But the analysis and the recommendations are applicable as well, of course, as we continue to try to mitigate the effects, the impacts of this virus. So we'll go through the analysis of the surge in NCR plus, and then the recommendations that come out of this analysis. So as of today or yesterday, we're already above 1.3 million total cases in the Philippines, and above 20,000 total deaths. These show the epidemic curves across the country from from the DOH Faster platform. And here you can see clearly what has happened. We have the second surge in NCR going down, but in Luzon, in the rest of Luzon, that hasn't really gone down as much. And then Visayas and Mindanao are in the middle of their biggest surge so far. And we've seen that a record number of areas have now been placed under MECQ. Meanwhile, we are deploying vaccines, but not in a fast enough pace. So as of this month, around 7 million vaccine doses so far. So we know that we still need to really mitigate the spread of the infections, as we of course try to accelerate the rollout of vaccines as we get more supply as well. Okay. Now, just putting us in the in a few months back. So that's the next slide. It's just the version of this, but starting in April, ending in April, and highlighting now the ECQ, the major ECQ and MECQ quarantines. Of course, I'm assuming here that we're all based in the Philippines, or at least familiar with these terms by now. So we've had because of the second surge, we've had NCR, right, and surrounding cities, what is been called the NCR Plus, placed under a so-called bubble from March 22 to 28, and then strict ECQ from March 29 to April 11. And we went back to the data and looked at how that played out. Next slide. And we saw that actually the surge, you can trace the surge as starting way back in February 18. This was actually around the Chinese New Year celebrations. And then by the nature of the epidemic, really starts relatively slowly, but it grows exponentially. So of course, with hindsight, you could say that you should have sounded the alarm bells as early as February. But actually, even without hindsight, if you also look ahead with foresight and track these daily cases and growth rates closely, and then act preemptively, you really have a small window of time to stop these surges from happening. But as we experienced, as we saw, it took more than a month, 6 weeks before the NCR Plus, before these restrictions, before the NCR Plus restrictions were imposed, when the surge has already been well underway. Of course, actually we want to avoid these large-scale lockdowns by mitigating the spread at the granular level, at the barangay or even street level. And that's the LGU response that we're talking about here. So let's also look at when those granular lockdowns happen. Next slide. Actually, that will come later. So for these MECQ, GCQ, and ECQ classifications, there's actually already risk classifications and criteria matrix of the IATF that we'll show later. But just for context, there's at that point, before the NCR bubble was imposed, and before the NCR bubble was imposed, NCR was in GCQ, and the other cities in NCR in NCR plus were in MGCQ. Right. Okay. Next slide. Yeah, and this is the matrix I was referring to. Based on epidemiological metrics, in particular, the average daily attack rate, or the average number of cases per day per 100,000 population, or ADAR, and the 2-week growth rate are defined as getting the difference between the cases in the most recent 2-week periods divided by the total number of new cases over the last 2 weeks. And these thresholds, you can assign, or FASTER assigns a risk classification for each LGU as minimal, low, moderate, high, or critical. And one can imagine, or one can propose similar triggers for LGU localized containment measures, or at least to really at the barangay level for granular lockdowns. In the same way that these measures are triggers for, or are justifications for elevating community quarantine levels. So we'll first look at how these metrics, the ADAR and 2-week growth rate, evolved over the weeks during the surge. Next slide. So you see here the map of NCR Plus, and color-coded by the risk classification that we just defined. And you can see it's just animated looping over from the end of January to April. You can see the surge spreading out over all NCR Plus. If we look at the timeline, as early as February 19, 2 cities were escalated from moderate to high risk classification level. That's Pasay City and Navotas City. And then by the end of February, another 2 cities, Makati and Malabon. And 2 weeks after, it has already spread to 14 cities with high or critical levels. And by the following week, all LGUs were already at higher critical levels. As of April 4, after 1 week under ECQ, all LGUs except for Pasay City remain at higher critical levels. Next slide. Another view of this is looking at the 2 metrics we introduced earlier. So ADAR and 2-week growth rate on the horizontal and vertical axis here. And each dot now is an LGU. And we're highlighting Pasay, that's the orange dot. But you can see how the LGUs move from the lower and moderate risk classifications to critical and high, the red and gray areas as the weeks pass. So this is something that definitely should be actively monitored. And then the flip side to it are the actions that need to be made. But you can see here, it takes also a long time to bring down again the 2-week growth rates, and even longer time to bring down the ADAR. So for example, here you can see Pasay, which actually made early and relatively earlier and more aggressive um, containment efforts than the other LGUs, and they were able to reverse the direction of their 2-week growth rates earlier, as you can see in the bottom panels. Again, next slide. Continuing on, so you see now Pasay continuing to decrease in 2-week growth rate until it has reached moderate levels, although still with high ADAR, while the rest of the LGUs are still at high growth rates. So we see here also some evidence of the effectivity of LGU containment efforts in containing the surge in their areas. Of course, we should also say that because people move freely between LGUs, there's really there's also the effect that what the neighboring LGUs are doing or not doing will also affect their neighboring LGUs. So we really need a concerted effort across LGUs, and even especially in areas, regions like NCR plus, where people are freely moving, working, living in different areas, and commuting back and forth, no, and bringing the virus with them. Next slide. Yeah. Right. So now we can ask, when did LGU start their lockdowns? No, unfortunately, this is one of cases where data collection, there's a gap in data collection, because each LGU just makes their own pronouncements. So here we actually looked at news reports to at least get the earliest date of lockdown, or whether even an LGU did a granular lockdown during this surge. And these are the summary. You can see that Pasay did it earliest in February 20. And then out of 21 localities in NCR Plus, only 4 cities imposed granular lockdowns in February. 6 cities did in March, and the rest, almost half, did not. They were not. Until ACQ happened and everything got locked down. So Pasay City was the first to impose, but this was still done more than a week from when a surge of cases can be detected. So there's really this critical time window that we keep missing, and more than a month has passed by before an ECQ was imposed region-wide. Okay, next slide. Okay, so in a view of the epidemic curve view, or the number of cases here, scaled from an early date, we see the key dates. So the Pasay lockdown in February 20 is actually relatively early. The Pasay City curve is the red one, and you can see that it started to trend down in March. So more than a month after it started this granular lockdowns and aggressive containment measures. But it was able to turn it around, while the others are still rising, and you see Navotas and San Juan in particular overtaken Pasay. and um, we're still at high levels by April here. Next slide. Yeah, so from presentation at the IATF meeting, we know that Pasay City did uh, put resources in imposing these granular lockdowns. It was actually yeah, spurred by the detection of the COVID-19 variant in Pasay. That's when it started. That's also when, now looking back, it's also where the surge started. They did 136 granular lockdowns and 2 barangay total lockdowns. They also increased massively their contact tracing efforts and swab testing efforts. And if you look at now, in the cases and the 2-week growth rates over over this period, you can see clearly that Pasay City has been the only one that was able to make its growth rate negative, um, while the rest were still struggling to contain the virus. Right. Slide. So this lends support to our key recommendations for anticipatory response of LGUs. The first is to establish a COVID-19 response advisory team within the appropriate bodies to provide regular briefings and alerts to LGUs on the need for targeted preemptive actions. As you can see, the window of time is really short, and there are early warning signs that can be detected from the data, especially at the barangay level, that can spur action at the LG level and also guide them in prioritizing efforts um, with their limited resources. The faster platform would be key to this because it allows real-time monitoring of both the risk classifications, and we are working now together with the faster team to also include these metrics at the barangay level. And finally, with the recognition that all these efforts need funding, uh, there are efforts to push for calamity fund for LGs to access from the national government, or set up some kind of agreement framework for supporting really the mobilization of resources at these um, at the critical times. And this includes, of course, the assistance for those that are affected by the granular lockdowns, enhanced testing and tracing, and expansion of healthcare capacity. Um, so we'll end here. These are still relevant to the to us today, and perhaps until we really see an end to this pandemic. This is just a summary slide, but in the interest of time, I think we can um, close here, and thank you everyone for listening, and we look forward to questions and comments and discussing with you further. Right here, these are the contact details of Riza if you would like to reach out as well after this.
All right. Thank you very much, Reina, Sheena, and Riza. So in the interest of time, we won't be splitting up into breakout rooms anymore, since I think we don't have time for to have an in-depth conversation in the breakout rooms. Instead, we'll just have the questions here in the main lobby, so everybody is open to ask questions. So probably entertain. If you guys are okay to extend, we'll probably entertain around 3 to 4 questions, depending on how long you guys are willing to extend, as well as for our audience, of course, if they're willing to stay. And I guess while they're thinking of questions, I can start. Um, yeah. So I'd like, yeah, first of all, very interesting presentations for everyone. I'm actually very much impressed with the work that you've done. I know there's a lot of work that are still ongoing, but even the results that you have are already impressive, from what we just shared at the very top level of what you've already accomplished and all the way to the details of like the analysis that are already being done right now. It's nice to know, there's always critic with how we're handling COVID and all that, but it's nice to know that there are data-driven actions that are being done. So, and I really appreciate the ones that you shared with us today. Yeah. Okay. I guess there's a lot of questions on top of mind right now. I know that we wouldn't have enough time to cover everything, and there's really a lot of things that I want to ask. I guess I want to go first to Sheena and your presentation a while ago. So you gave a recommendation about like we should also be able to subsidize. I think not just the lowest class, but I think as well as class D and E. I'm just curious in terms of the analysis. Are you also able to provide maybe in the future, if we develop the study, the amount to be that we can give to a specific socioeconomic class or even to a more granular level? Because I think that's one of the challenges right now, right? And the government is that they're not really sure how much to subsidize. Do you think that would be a potential um, thing to do with the project that you're working on?
Yeah, we have been having discussions about universal basic income, and we were testing parang computing various amounts based on a basket of goods. There's no official amount yet, like from an official research, but like initial computations are really quite high given the actual needs of the households. Like our initial assessment back then was it's the 5 to 8,000 is quite low, right? But so the consideration is to make it like what the current Bayanihan 3 discussions are they're discussing of giving around 2,000, right, per individual. So it's quite high for each household. So I think that's the approach that's the reason also why they're increasing that amount, because the past amounts was not that enough to cover the needs of the households. So Riza, can I share about our initial computations? It's not yet official yet, so maybe it's like might preempt a lot of things.
ikaw, do you want to share it
Okay, yes,
na ba?
I think tsaka na lang siguro kapag pag official natin yung research, kasi parang medyo crude pa rin yung yung computations from our end, yung mga initial discussions lang about UBI, but yun, there are considerations of like those amounts na mas malaki.
Okay, yeah, no worries, no pressure in sharing. I'm just really curious and like the direction, Yeah, so no pressure naman. So thank you, Sheena. I see Aaron raising his hand. Aaron, are you okay to unmute and ask your question?
Hello.
There, I think we can't hear you earlier. Are you speaking?
Hello, ma'am. Yeah, I just want to thank you for the presentation of non-traditional bit. Yeah. So yeah, I want to thank you earlier for the presentation. Like, I really appreciate yung paggamit ng non-traditional data sets. So it really involves like creativity on your part sa pag-solve ng problem. But yeah, my question is about like how do you like prioritize your projects? Kasi parang na-mention na about SDGs, and parang on my end, parang nakikita ko siya as very like ang laki ng scope. So how do you like prioritize your like projects, and how do you evaluate na parang nami-meet yung mga SDGs na yun? So yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Sige. That's actually a very good question. Something that I think we try to grapple with every day. So as I mentioned, the Pintig Lab started last year, and at some point we thought mass recovery na yung focus, but then nagka-surge tayo earlier this year. So at some point we had to drop everything else and focus our efforts again on recovery. So that's how we started again with our research, yung pinakita ni Reina, and that actually translated into something, I guess, more action oriented. So now we're doing LGU advisory support. So we have Pasig City now as a pilot and looking to partner with hindi, 5 more LGUs, and then providing that parang mentorship support in terms of understanding the analytics that's available on Faster, so they could do their granular lockdowns if needed. And then yes, the SDG goal is like it's huge. I mean, the goal lang ay SDG, but then we want to measure the SDG side, and that's a huge responsibility. It's not something that's completely sitting on the back of our team sa Pintig Lab. It's a whole UN initiative. But the Pintig Lab is the parang data analytics team within the country office. We're trying to take it bit by bit, piece by piece. So yung non-traditional naman na data set. So we did list this type of research na present ni Sheena, but we also shared the data with NEDA. So they're also using it as well in their analysis. We're trying to understand how NEDA is using it for socioeconomic recovery, and trying to match that as well with how do we build this data portal or data pool that would support their decision making, and trying to think about how can local governments do something similar if possible, if kaya siya sa LGU level. Right now, because we're still coming out of COVID, we're focusing on SDGs na, I mean, of course, you're looking into poverty, you're looking into inequality, kasi the pandemic really changed the landscape. So you have to revisit again. We're also working with the climate team at UNDP, kasi they're also looking into, like, kasi COVID is a pandemic, it's also a model of disaster response. So how can this type of data science and real-time evidence ganyan, can also work for different types of disasters as well. I guess my short answer would be, it's a very hard question. Which of the SDGs to prioritize? It's a very big responsibility and task. But we're taking it bit by bit, day by day, and also recognizing where we are right now. So we're still in the thick of the pandemic, and then the Pintig Lab is still trying to respond to its first goal. So medyo dun kami na pupunta, but still on the side, we still want to do yung mas socio-economic yung focus niya. But we're open then to suggestions if merong mga burning SDGs na parang feeling ng group dapat tugunan agad. Open din kami. Thank you. I don't know if Reina or Sheena would like to add.
Although may direction din to include in all analysis yung gender aspect din, oo. So may ganong lang din. Priority lang din for the office.
Right. Yes, and Miss Riza posted her email. So if there is a burning SDG concern that you want to share, then maybe you can send her an email and let's see if there's any collaboration opportunities there. Yes. Cheska is raising her hand. So maybe Cheska, you can unmute and ask your question.
Hi. Actually, I'm not too sure now, because actually my question was sort of the same as Aaron's as well. So mine's more on the policy advocacy part. When Riza presented at the start, I was especially interested when she said that they wanted to start a digital SDG platform. So that's something that caught my attention, especially when she said that they wanted to utilize real-time data as well for this. So I guess it's connected to Aaron's. I was just wondering what exact SDGs you guys are primarily looking at now. So yeah, that's it. And thank you so much for your presentation. It was so insightful and really refreshing to see as well that there's a team behind the Philippine government that's helping in terms of data. So it's more power to you guys and good luck with everything.
Thanks, Cheska, for the question. I'm not sure if Sheena or Reina can share more about the SDG. We made a prototype SDG dashboard, pero hindi lahat ng SDG. Yung problem kasi natin right now, like, there's a lot of data available everywhere, national, local, ganyan. But if we put it all together and try to see if each SDG, and we have 17 SDGs, and under each SDG, there's multiple indicators pa. So that's 100, ako nakalimutan ko na yung number, basta 100 plus indicators that you're trying to monitor and put a data point to. Kulang talaga tayo. So I think there are only maybe four or six SDGs, and correct me if I'm wrong, team, ha, that we can really measure. So we're starting with the things na meron na tayong data for. Parang to do a, what do you call this, like a stock take of what we already have. And then yung mga wala pa o yung mga may gaps, yun yung hahanapan natin ng non-traditional data sets. But just to mention then maybe bigger UN collaboration, there's also something we're working on called the Data Futures Platform. And then that's a global initiative na where it's putting together data from a lot of countries. And also naglalagay din sila, hindi ko na ako nandun na, they're testing pa the non-traditional data set. So they have actually a bigger pool of data. Not sure lang on how granular that will be for the Philippines, but we will be one of the pilots. So we'll see how that can be useful for us.
Okay, and I think it's the last question from the audience, since I know that it's a Saturday night and I'm not sure if everyone has had dinner already. So I think that's a follow-up from what Cheska asked. Are there projects focused specifically on environmental impact of the pandemic, such as waste from face shields, increased food delivery, and those other effects of in the environment of the pandemic?
Sige. I can answer a little bit on that. Pero I think Reina might have a more answer. She's also yung natin with shield sa climate. Although I'm not sure how granular that will be. But we're actually working with the DOH and I get must be ICT on vaccines. And this is a collaboration with WHO, UNICEF, all the other World Bank, actually the maybe bigger players in terms of vaccines. And merong move actually, not just, so we're supporting yung we will support the public dashboard for vaccine information. Pero meron ding call to actually see ano ba yung gagawin dun sa waste from the syringes, from everything. So that's a collaboration with the climate action team at the UN. So tinitignan na nila yun ngayon kasi ang daming waste talaga na mangyayari from there. And then at the same time, so if there's Pintig Lab, there's also something called yung Accelerator Lab who actually conceptualized Pintig Lab. So parang sister lab namin sila, nanay din, labo. Tapos they're working on research sa ano tawag doon? Yung ano din ako, nakalimutan ko. Circular economy. And then also yung low impact life. Zero waste. They're also doing research on zero waste and how to promote more people to do that. So merong mga ganung initiatives. But there's also, we're partnering din with the climate action team to have like parang projections for other disasters. Although I guess it's not so much on the waste aspect, no.
Parang yung sa Accelerator Lab ay about din, parang messaging to influence din yung behavior towards yung zero waste.
Yeah.
So parang they're testing various messaging din sa social media. Ganon.
Meron ding yung they have drones. Tapos they're monitoring the trash kahit din sa Pasig River, yung mga ganon, and then working with different LGUs to address the waste problem that we have and plastics.
exploring remote sensing data from satellites as well. So, yeah, non-traditional data sources din. Ayan na, ito na yung ating last and best
Yes.
question.
Actually, it's perfect. Eunice asked the question that's also in my mind. So it's like there's really a lot of things. I guess even outside Pintig Lab, you're mentioning now projects of just the whole UNDP, and you guys are doing a lot of amazing work. And yeah, so I know that there's ways probably that for other people to help. So I guess the last question that we can ask is what's next for Pintig Lab, and how can our fellows and our students participate in any of your activities or be able to join in any of your projects?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and also the reason why that we're here today. So in the next maybe month or 2 months, may lalabas na ad for data managers for the Department of Health. So if you or someone that you know is interested in working on COVID, derecho to the source, to the people who will be making the decisions, you'll be working with them. We will be looking for 2 data managers. But other than that, we will continue to look for interns. We've just actually got interns right now. We had an ad a month ago or 2 months ago. And then as we build on projects and depending on funding that we actually get, we will be hiring more data scientists as well. So keep a lookout sa aming procurement page. We're all overworked. We need more people actually. So keep a lookout for that. And also yung ibang events, please participate with us. And then ano pa bang pwedeng magawa that na maybe wala pa sa hiring stage?
Sure, we can invite them also to our webinars and forums, especially as we build this advocacy network for open data, for the data analytics for both response and recovery. We really parang we're in this together because we're the community that's already appreciate with the deep level of appreciation of this, and it's our also our role or our job to influence the rest of society, including government and other partners here. I also shared links dito sa chat.
Yan.
So
Correct.
yeah, start following UNDP. Meron din tayo. Of course, we're on Facebook, LinkedIn, social media. And of course, feel free to reach out to us and connect as we continue this journey together.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Yes, just keep sending us all of those invites, webinars, talks, hiring. We'll forward them all to the students and the alumni community and Eskwelabs. I'm sure a lot of people are interested in joining you in the work that you do. Right, so thank you very much again for tonight. We went over time, so apologies for that. But I do hope you enjoyed your time with us tonight. I hope that you'll have this opportunity again to be able to talk to one another, mingle, and as Miss Reina mentioned, just to be part of this community. We're all trying to do our best to help in whatever way that we can. And as they requested before we end, of course, there's the mandatory photo op. So, yeah, participants, please do turn on your videos so that we can have your picture.
All right. Okay. I'll be taking a photo. So, sige, 5 more seconds for the other people who want to join. Aaron, Rowan, Joachim, Casey, Matthew. All right. Sige. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Okay. One more. 1, 2, 3. Smile. All right. Ay, si Matthew. Did they turn on their cams? Okay, sige. Okay na. Thank you guys so much. And Riza, Sheena, and Reina, thank you so much for your time this Saturday evening. And then for those who are attending today, I'll be sending the recording of this talk naman to you guys so you can go back and then watch the presentations again. And Yeah, that's it. Have a good evening, and then I'll just be flashing a slide with Riza's email again. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you, Julia. Thanks, Thea. Nice to meet
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Right. Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you so much.